So hello there, and welcome to a new Night of the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV, and whatever I want for about half an hour to an hour once a week. And in today's podcast, I'm doing the new big release of this week in Creed 3. And I'm also talking about my thoughts on the Rocky/Creed franchise as a whole. But before I get into all that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, that if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello there to my viewers, but heck, you just don't have the time to watch the full podcast on YouTube, they can also check this podcast out audibly on Spotify at Nights and Movies on that platform. And there should also be a link to my Spotify account in the description of this video below. But if you are listening on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check the podcast out visually on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever you are watching or listening to the podcast, if you do enjoy the podcast, please feel free to like and subscribe. I mean, if you don't enjoy the podcast, you don't have to like and subscribe, but I will feel offended. But if you do enjoy the podcast, please feel free to like, subscribe, and also leave some feedback so I know what to improve on in the near distant future as well. And give me some ideas of things to talk about in future podcasts. I'd love to get some ideas. So yeah, got anything you want to tell me about this podcast, any feedback you want to give me, please let me know in the comment section below. If you're watching this on YouTube, or let me know in the feedback section if you are listening to this on Spotify. But anyway, let's get straight into it today, shall we? Let's not do any more faffing about. Yeah, let's not do any more faffing about. Let's get straight into my view of Creed 3 and my thoughts on the Rocky/Creed franchise as a whole. So, Creed 3, like I already mentioned, is a new film in the Rocky franchise. And the film once again follows Adonis Creed, once again played by Michael B. Jordan, who also directs this one. You know, he didn't direct the previous two Creed films, but he's directing this one. This is his directional debut. And he runs into an old friend in this film, though. He runs into an old friend called Damien, played by Jonathan Majors, and then beef builds between the two characters. And a fight takes place as well between the two characters towards in the film, as the trailers have shown. And I have been watching the Rocky and Creed films over the past week leading up to this one, so I knew about Rocky's story, I knew about Apollo Creed's story, and so I knew about Adonis Creed's story as well. Because I think it's all key. I think especially when you get into the Creed films, you realise how much of, you know, both Rocky's story and Apollo Creed's story are key to the overall narrative of all the Rocky films and all the Creed films. So I wanted to know about this story, and I had seen the first Rocky, I think it was about 2 years ago now. It may have been a bit shorter, but it feels about 2 years ago. It's been a long 2 years. But I remember reviewing that first Rocky film on this channel, and I was really impressed by it. It was not the film I expected to be. I was really taken aback by how compelling and how emotionally engaging I found that first Rocky. It was a really, really good film. And I hadn't watched any of the other Rocky films since watching that first one, though, because I must admit off the bat, I'm not a fan of the sport of boxing whatsoever. I don't find it engaging, I don't find it interesting, and I don't get it. It's like football for me. I don't get football, and I don't get boxing. They're just sports that really turn me off, to be honest. I just don't get it. So I've been put off watching the Rocky films simply for that reason. I'm not really into the whole sport of boxing, and I've heard from numerous people who had watched the Rocky sequels that they are pretty much what you expect. But when I sat down to watch Rocky 2 about a week ago now, it was last Sunday, I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed that film. It's a solid sequel. I mean, the biggest problem with Rocky 2 is that it only works as a sequel. I don't think it works as a film within itself. I don't think it works as a standalone film. But you know, Sylvester Stallone wrote and directed that film. He did a great job doing that. And I really enjoyed Rocky 2. Like, I heard from some people that it wasn't that good. I had a great time watching it. I mean, it wasn't as good as first Rocky, but, you know, that first Rocky won Best Picture. I think it did anyway. And the second one, okay, it wasn't Best Picture worthy, if you will. But it was still really entertaining, and I loved how it continued with these characters and how it continued with the character of Apollo Creed. It made sense. And then you go on to Rocky 3, and the franchise becomes pretty much what you expect, though. Rocky 3, although I enjoyed it, I've enjoyed all the Rocky films, to be honest, but although I enjoyed Rocky 3, it's very silly. And it's also very predictable. You know where things are going. It was nice seeing Mr. T in there, and it was nice seeing all these characters' arcs continue. Like you have, Adrian, Rocky's love interest. She's still in Rocky 3. She's in Rocky 4 as well, and she's in Rocky 5. Yes, she is. And so yeah, it was nice seeing all those characters. Paulie as well. Nice seeing those character arcs continue, and also I liked the use of Eye the Tiger in there as well. I thought that was used particularly well. But Rocky 3, although I enjoyed it, I definitely was not bored watching that film. I didn't find it nearly as entertaining as either Rocky 2 or Rocky 1. Yeah, so I liked Rocky 3. I did. And then you go on to Rocky 4, which is the one with the Russians and Drago and everything like that. And again, I enjoyed Rocky 4, but this one's even sillier than Rocky 3. Rocky 4 was even sillier than Rocky 3, and it has about 4 montages, 3 of which are training montages, and after a while, okay, yeah, I get it, you're training for the boxing match, I don't need to see another montage sequence, and I enjoy all the montage sequences in all the Rocky films, but I didn't need to see 4 of them, or 3 of them, in Rocky 4, and also Drago in that film, the main villain of Rocky 4, is a quite one-dimensional character. He's essentially a superhuman. And again, I wasn't really interested in the villain too much. I wasn't really interested in the villain too much in Rocky 3, and that's kind of the same in Rocky Thor. Rocky Thor? That'd be an interesting film. Thor with Rocky. Sorry, no, Rocky 4. But I liked a lot of that film, though. I still enjoyed watching, seeing Rocky train in Russia and seeing him go kind of through a different mindset because, if you didn't know already, spoiler here for Rocky 4, Apollo Creed dies in that film, which is why Rocky decides to face off against Drago because Drago killed him. So yeah, there's a lot I liked about Rocky 4, but it's very silly. And then you go on to Rocky 5, and the silliness and the stupidness goes to another level. I know Rocky 5 is the film in the Rocky franchise that for the most part people don't really like. I had a good time with it though. It's very much in your face though at the same time. I was watching it and it keeps being out of the music, the way it was directed, it was just all very much in your face, and it was like, look at this, okay, the performances, everyone's shouting, it was very much in your face, but I still enjoyed watching it. It was still an entertaining Rocky film in my opinion. I mean, Rocky's kid in that film was very annoying. The one who played his kid is very annoying in that one, and I wasn't totally in love with the use of music, and I didn't think the direction was as tight as it could have been, and I thought the end was silly on another level, but it was still entertaining. I still had a good time with that film. And then, though, you get onto Rocky Balboa, which is the Rocky film that apparently, and I might be wrong here, so do correct me if I am, apparently Sylvester Stallone made this film as a sort of sorry for Rocky 5, kind of like the same way Steven Spielberg made Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade as a sorry for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom because he wasn't happy with that film. And apparently that's what Sylvester Stallone did with this one as well, did with Rocky Balboa. And again, I liked Rocky Balboa, but I didn't love it. I wanted to love Rocky Balboa, and it's got a lot of really good moments. I like the way it continued Rocky's storyline, and the storyline with Rocky's son, and the storyline with Paulie. I think the first half of that film is actually very good. It's a very personal story. But then the second half, when you get all back into the box and stuff, I just didn't find it quite as compelling as I wanted to. I kind of got bored in the second half of Rocky Balboa. It's not a bad film, but just the way it was shot as well, it felt very 2006. The film came out in 2006, and it was shot in a very similar way to City of God, if anyone's seen that film. Or, the Bad Boys films, the first 2 Bad Boys films anyway. It's shot in a very similar way to that. It's sort of like MTV style, filmmaking. And it just, I wanted to love Rocky Balboa, and I didn't. Although there's a lot about that film which I did really like. I like how it continued the Rocky story. It just kind of took it back to its roots. I just wish it worked for me more. But then in 2015, 9 years after Rocky Balboa, if I'm getting my dates correct here, I don't know if I'm winging all the date stuff, but in 2015, after 9 years after Rocky Balboa, the Rocky franchise kind of continued with Creed. Now, Creed, if you count it, yeah, it is a Rocky film. I'm going to say it's because Rocky's in it. You know, Sylvester Stallone returned as Rocky. He didn't want to. After Rocky Balboa, he didn't want to do any Rocky films, but Ryan Coogler, who most people might know, you know, directed the latest two Black Panther films. He also directed Fruitvale Station. He came with his idea for a Rocky film, but this time focusing on Apollo Creed's son. And Sylvester Stallone, from what I've heard, didn't really want to do another Rocky film. But then he watched Fruitvale Station, which is a great film, by the way, if you haven't seen it. Quite a powerful and emotional and quite a dark film, but a very good film at that. He watched that and he went, oh, right, yeah, I want to do it now. Because Ryan Coogler, who directed Fruitvale Station, he was going to direct this new Creed film. And Creed was brilliant. Creed did something I really didn't expect it to do. Like, I only watched Creed a couple of nights ago. Bear in mind, I've only watched the Rocky films, you know, over the past week. I only watched Creed a couple of nights ago, and I really wasn't expecting too much from it. I kind of felt, after Rocky Balboa, that the franchise was a bit, was just kind of, you know, flogging a dead horse. But then, with Creed, I was like, oh, this is clever. Like, it reignited that life and that sort of, you know, passion into the Rocky franchise. You felt like you were watching this story being told from people who loved the previous, what was it, 6 Rocky films, if you count Rocky Balboa, which I'm doing. You know, it felt like it was someone making that film who loved the previous 6 films and was going, now I'm going to reboot this in a way that would work for modern audiences, but would also work for fans who were, would also work for people who were fans of the previous 6 Rocky films. And Creed is brilliant. Like, it's so good. It's so emotionally engaging and so riveting at the same time. It's so well written and it's so massively directed. Like, the boxing sequences in that film are incredible. They're done in like one long takes, you know, like 1917. It's in one long take. Well, it's made to look like it is, and like Spielberg does a lot as well. I'm referring to Spielberg quite a bit in this podcast, but yeah, you know, a lot of the boxing sequences are done these one long takes, and just watching them, it's like you can't take your eyes off the screen because of how massively it's directed. And I just thought it was brilliant. Like, I was watching Creed and going, oh, I get why everyone's raving about this film back in 2015. Like, I even remember when it came out, and I was like, I haven't watched the Rocky films, and I'm not really into boxing. This one won't be for me. And I didn't watch it in 2015. I only watched it a couple of nights ago, but I was thoroughly impressed by it. Like, really, really impressed. And also, it's got one of my favourite lines of dialogue I've seen in any film over the past 10 years or so, which is, if you fight, then I'll fight. If you've seen the first Creed film, you'll know how powerful that line of dialogue is. If you fight, then I'll fight. That line of dialogue really caught me off guard. But then I also watched Creed 2. And Creed 2, again, really impressed me. It's a very good sequel that still managed to reignite, you know, life into this franchise, which has been going for how many years? You know, 30 years or so, maybe even longer than that. I haven't counted, but Creed 2 was great. And I love as well in Creed 2 how not only did it continue Rocky's storyline in a very clever way and in a very engaging way, but it also continued Drago's storyline, Drago, who's a villain in Rocky 4, in a very, very interesting way. I was caught off guard by how compelled I was into the character of Drago in Creed 2, the older Drago. You know, you get the younger Drago in Creed 2 as well. He was still an interesting character, but he's nowhere near as interesting as the older Drago in Creed 2. I love how they continue those storylines. Again, how well it was directed. It wasn't Ryan Coogler directing the second Creed film because he was working on Black Panther instead. But someone else directed, I forgot the name of the person off the top of my head right now, but he did a great job. I love how they continued Rocky's storyline. Also, I love how they continued Adonis Creed's storyline as well, with him And this isn't really a spoiler because it was revealed in the trailers for Creed 2. I remember watching them when it came out in the cinema. You know, I remember being in the cinema back in 2018 and seeing trailers for Creed 2 and seeing it in the trailer. So this isn't really a spoiler, but I love how Adonis Creed and Tessa Thompson's character Bianca get a kid in that film. And I love how that is incorporated into Creed 2 as well. And yeah, I had a great time with Creed 2. I'd heard from some people that it wasn't as good as the first Creed, it was only okay. I watched it, I was like, wow, yeah, a lot of this film is really powerful, and again, much like the first Creed film, it's catching me off guard, and I love how it also finished off Rocky's storyline. Like, towards in the film, when you see Rocky saying to Adonis Creed, it's your time, and he just sits there and sits back, and you know, the boxing sort of ring is just there with him sitting in front of it. If you've seen the film, you probably know what I'm talking about, and it's just such a scene that I was almost in tears by the end of Creed 2. And also, the last couple of scenes where Adonis Creed is at Apollo Creed's grave, and also when Rocky goes back to visit his son. I mean, if you haven't really seen the Rocky franchise, you won't understand the emotional importance of those scenes, the emotional significance of those scenes. But I was watching, I was almost in tears. Like, I've not really been the biggest fan of the Rocky franchise. I've enjoyed all the films. I think the first two are great, and I really like the Creed films. But I was like, God, this film's almost made me cry, you know. I was really caught off by it. I was really caught off guard by it. And now you get into Creed 3, though. And I've already spoken about it. Michael B. Jordan is, you know, he's in the director's chair of this one. Ryan Coogler was working on Black Panther Wakanda Forever, so he didn't direct it. And he actually said to Michael B. Jordan, you know, they're really good friends. If you notice, by the way, Michael B. Jordan is in all of Ryan Coogler's films. Slight spoilers there for Black Panther Wakanda Forever in case you haven't seen it, but, you know, that film's been out since last November. But still, yeah, Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan are good friends, and Ryan Coogler said to Michael B. Jordan, who obviously, you know, played Adonis Creed in the previous two Creed films, he said, you could direct this one. And so Michael B. Jordan is you know, in the director's chair of this film. You have Tessa Thompson returning as well. Got some other cast members returning. Young Drago is back. That isn't really a spoiler, but he's back in there. And yeah, but at the same time though, you've got all those characters returning, but you don't have Rocky returning in this film. Rocky is absent from this one. No Sylvester Stallone, sadly. But you have Jonathan Majors in there as the villain. And here's the thing with Creed 3. I liked it quite a lot. I was really entertained by it. But it's my least favourite of the Creed films. And that's not to say it's bad, though. The previous two Creed films have both been brilliant, in my opinion. I mean, the first one is brillianter. That's not even a word. But, you know, the first one is better than the second Creed film. But Creed 3 is still really good. And the fact that, you know, the Rocky and Creed franchise, if you put them together, this is 9 films in. Creed 3 is 9 films into the Rocky franchise, and yet it still manages to breathe new life into this franchise, though. And I think a lot of that is down to Michael B. Jordan's direction. Michael B. Jordan is just... It's stupid that he exists. Not only is it really good looking, like, I'm not gay, but at the same time, though, if I was, I mean, man alive, he is an attractive person. And not only is he a great actor, but he also seems to be a great director as well. Like, his direction with this film is really, really good. Like, the way he directs the boxing sequences was the stuff that impressed me the most, because I've already spoken about this. I'm never really that interested in the boxing sequences in these Rocky films whatsoever. You know, in the first 6 Rocky films, I would never really be that interested in the boxing stuff. In fact, that would be stuff where I'd kind of be like, yeah, you're losing me a bit. Towards in the film when they have a big boxing match, with the exception of the first Rocky film, and kind of Rocky 2, although even that I got a bit unengaged by. I never really felt engaged by any of the boxing sequences in any of the Rocky films. But then you get into the Creed franchise, the Creed part of the Rocky franchise, and I had been interested in the boxing sequences. And I was going into this film thinking, now, how is it going to make me interested and engaged during those boxing sequences? Because I don't really care about boxing whatsoever. But it did keep me engaged. And it did keep me interested in what was going on. And, like, the final boxing sequence in this film is incredible. It's the best part of the film, in my opinion. Like, if you just watched the final boxing match in this film, the final boxing sequence, and nothing else, nothing else from Creed 3, you would know what the film was about, though. Like, the final boxing sequence is done so masterfully. I was watching that going, wow. I didn't expect them to go like this with this final boxing match. It was done in a really fresh and unique and compelling way. I was sat there going, yeah, I'm really liking the way they're doing this boxing match. Now, the rest of the film doesn't quite live up to that ending, in my opinion. Like, the first half of the film, I've got to admit, I didn't find that engaging and that compelling. In fact, the first half of the film, in my opinion, the thing about the first half of the film, I was sitting there wondering where Rocky was. And maybe that is because I've been watching all the Rocky films over the past week, and all the Creed films as well leading up to this. I mean, the other two Creed films, which Rocky is in. And I was wondering where Rocky was throughout the first, hour of this film, because its presence felt absent. It did in some parts. Like, I love the way they finish off that character in Creed 2. I think that was probably the perfect way to finish off the Rocky character. But at the same time, though, there are moments in Creed 3 where you're kind of wondering, where is Rocky? Like, there's one moment in particular, like a party that Bianca's done, Tessa Thompson's character, and you're like, oh, but where's Rocky? And also, in Creed 2 as well, Rocky became the godfather to Adonis Creed's daughter. And again, he's not really in this film. And if he's a godfather, you'd think he'd be in there a bit more, but he's not. And there are just moments where, it feels like if Rocky was in there, it might have worked a bit better for me. Because I know there's been some stuff going on behind the scenes of this film about why he's not in it, and that's unfortunate because I think he's even come out and said that he's never going to watch Creed 3, and he's missing out because the film's really entertaining. But I just would have liked at least one mention as to where Rocky is, so they could potentially bring him back. I mean, he might. Maybe got some plans in Creed 4 and 5, and by the way, they do have plans to do Creed 4 and 5 to bring back Rocky. Maybe got some plans in the future. I don't know. No one knows. I mean, maybe Sylvester Stallone does, but we don't know. So, maybe got some plans to bring him back, and maybe that's why they didn't mention it. But there was a couple moments in the film where they didn't mention, I thought they could have. Like, they don't even have a really passing line to say where Rocky is. Like, they could have said, oh, he's up in, wherever, living with his son. That's all you needed, one line to say that. But you didn't have that. There's one passing reference to him when they mention about the boxing match between Apollo Creed and Rocky from the first one. Or was it when Apollo Creed was training Rocky? But it's something like that. There's one passing reference to Rocky throughout this film. But other than that, it did kind of feel like this film had a Rocky-shaped hole in there. Especially when, the other two nights, for the past 2 nights, I've been watching the Creed films. I've been watching the first 2 Creed films, and Rocky has such a presence in those films, though. When he's in there, you realise how important he is to that narrative, to Adonis Creed's narrative. He's so important to that story. And in this film, he's just forgotten about. And I felt that was a bit abrupt, to be honest. I thought it was a bit abrupt, just to lose him out of the film and go, oh, Rocky's not here anymore. Why? Because we haven't thought of reasons. That's what it kind of felt like. And at the same time, though, I didn't find the film quite as emotionally engaging as the first 2 Creed films, and also I wasn't too interested in the story. Like, it's pretty much what you expect from a Rocky story in the end. It's nothing, it's nothing that we haven't already seen in the Rocky franchise or in the Creed films. This sort of story, it feels very familiar. It's a sort of paint by numbers sort of Rocky film with a story. You got an old friend, he's coming back, he wants to, have a boxing match with Adonis Creed, with our main character. It feels like something we've seen before. But saying all that, though, even so I've got my criticisms, and even so it is a flawed film, I still really enjoyed it. Like, I still had a great time with this film in the cinema. And so even so, I do think it's the quote-unquote worst film in the Creed/Rocky franchise. No, it's not the worst film in the Rocky franchise. But even so, it's the worst of all 3 Creed films. It's still really good. So that's saying a lot, like I said before, Michael B. Jordan's direction is great. It really impressed me. Like, normally when a director, works in a big budget film like this for the first time, they don't do a great job. Take a look at Simon Kinberg with X-Men Dark Phoenix. That was the first film he directed, and he didn't do a good job with it. But then you take a look at, Michael B. Jordan in this film. This is the first time he directed a big budget film like this, and he handles it well. Every scene feels like it's been carefully planned, well staged, and his direction, especially in the boxing sequences, was the stuff that really impressed me. Jonathan Majors kills it. He was the best part of, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but he's even better in this film. He is phenomenal in this film. Like, every single time he's on screen, I felt like I was possessed by Jonathan Majors in this film. Like, you watch him go, man, he gives such a good performance. He is amazing, and I can't wait to see more of Jonathan Majors in other films going forward. Then also in this film, you got Tessa Thompson returning, and Tessa Thompson gives her best performance in the Creed films, in my opinion, in this film. Like, she's really good, and I really like the way they developed that character as well. I thought that was a very interesting way that they took her storyline. Like, if you watch the previous two Creed films, she's going deaf in those films. And then the way they deal with the fact that she's going deaf in this film, I thought was very, very interesting and very clever. I really liked that. And also, Michael B. Jordan kills it once again as Adonis Creed. I thought his performance in the first two Creed films was great, and I believe in that character as well. A lot of that's down to his performance, but also a lot down to the writing, and the writing with the Adonis Creed character continues to be great in this film, and Michael B. Jordan's performance continues to be great as well. And also, I really like the actress who played Adonis Creed and Bianca's daughter. Like, it's a deaf actress, and I'm always impressed when a film or TV show has a deaf actor or deaf actress in, because that's a very hard thing to do, probably, to direct an actor or actress like that, because it must be quite tricky, especially if you don't know sign language. And I felt the way that character was incorporated into the film was very good. Like, the scenes with the daughter, with Adonis Creed's daughter in the film, were both emotional and intimate. Like, the very first scene with the daughter was just so lovely to watch. It was great. I loved that character. And I can't wait to see these characters back as well. I think all the character storylines continue to be great, and the music's great in this film, and it's shot beautifully in the cinematography. And like I said before, it's really well made. Michael B. Jordan does a great job. I just wish that I felt more compelled into this story. I felt that the other two Creed films had more compelling stories, but the fact that this Creed film is still good, the fact that it is still entertaining, and the fact that it still, breathes new life into this franchise, which has been going for how many years? 40 odd years now, that's saying a lot. And I'm looking forward to seeing more films in the franchise as well. This film, although not as good as the first two Creed films, still made me interested. It still kept my interest in this franchise, and I think it does a great job. I wish I had Rocky in there, and maybe, again, like I said before, maybe I'm just saying that because I watched all previous Rocky films and all the previous Creed films, this week and this previous week, so it did kind of feel like I was expecting to see Rocky in this film, and even so I knew that he wasn't in this film. I'd heard, before, and that he wasn't going to be in this film. Part of me wanted to see him nonetheless, and so the fact that he wasn't in this film was a bit, it was a bit disappointing, but that's just my own expectations taking over me there. And even so, this film is a bit flawed in parts in the story. Like, Jonathan Majors' storyline in this film is a tad bit, you have to suspend disbelief with that storyline. And even though the film wasn't as compelling as I would have wanted to be, and even so it wasn't as emotionally engaging as the previous two Creed films, it's still good, it's still great. If you're a fan of the Rocky franchise, and the Rocky franchise and the previous two Creed films, I would definitely recommend this one. And I really enjoyed it. I just didn't love it though. But I don't have to love every film I see. So I'm happy that I enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend it. And like I titled this podcast today, Creed 3 is a flawed but Flavoured Threquel. And that's kind of how I feel about the film as a whole. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Creed 3, I'm going to say that it's about a 7.3 out of 10. The reason I'm giving it that rating and not a 7.5 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10 is because a 7 out of 10 normally for me is just enjoyable. That's what gave Cocaine Bear. Cocaine Bear is a film I really enjoyed, but nothing more, nothing less. And then 7.5 out of 10 is when it's impressed me, but hasn't quite, hasn't really impressed me, hasn't thoroughly impressed me. So I'd probably say that, the first Creed film for me is about an 8.5 out of 10. The second Creed film for me is an 8 out of 10. And this Creed film is a 7.3 out of 10, just simply because I was impressed by it, but I was more impressed by the execution of the film. I wasn't as impressed by the storytelling, but I still was impressed by it, though. I still was impressed by, the way Michael B. Jordan directed the film. I know I'm going on about that, but from someone, this is his first time directing a film like this, and he does such a great job. In fact, I didn't think about it before, but he's following in Sylvester Stallone's footsteps. Sylvester Stallone, although it wasn't the first film he directed, he did end up directing a lot of the Rocky films. The first Rocky film he directed was Rocky 2. That wasn't the first film he directed. He directed something else beforehand. But, he directed Rocky 2, he directed Rocky 3, he directed Rocky 4, he didn't direct Rocky 5, but he directed Rocky Balboa. And now Michael B. Jordan is kind of doing the same. He's directed Creed 3, and the chances are he'll probably direct more Creed films in the future because this one has got a great critical response, and a lot of people have been praising his direction, and rightly so. It's really well directed, and that's the thing which impressed me. Normally, I don't care about boxing sequences in the Rocky films. I haven't really cared about boxing sequences in any Rocky films, with the exception of Rocky 1 and Rocky 2. And then you get into this film, though, and you look at the other two Creed films, and they did a great way of just keeping you engaged. Keeping you engaged and keeping your eyes on the screen during these boxing matches. Because otherwise, I would normally tap out during those sequences and go, okay, he's going to win, just get the film over with now. That's what I kind of felt like in, Rocky 3 to Rocky Balboa. But then in this film, I was watching the boxing match going, you know what? This is the best part of the film, particularly the final boxing match. There's other boxing match in the film as well, which, again, are really well done. But it's a final boxing match where I was like, that is pretty brilliant. And so, overall, the film is good. I enjoyed it. I recommend it. You probably don't have to watch the other Rocky films and the other Creed films to understand this one. So if you haven't watched any others, that's probably fine if you wanted to watch this one as well. But at the same time, though, if you haven't watched any of the Rocky films and you haven't watched any of the other Creed films, go and check them out because they're good. Or at least go and check out the other Creed films, though. I would recommend it. I mean, you don't have to before Creed 3, but, if you want to get more out of Creed 3, do go and check out at least the first two Creed films because they're very good films. But you don't have to understand this one. And again, that's another merit of this film. It's got a lot of merits in there. I just didn't find the story that interesting. But I'm interested in seeing more Creed films. And I enjoyed watching it. I watched it in a pretty packed cinema, and everyone in my cinema seemed to enjoy watching it as well. I enjoyed it. How many times can you say enjoy in this podcast? But no, I had a great time with this film. And yeah, I know I said before, but I'll say it again. I definitely recommend it. And for me, it was a flawed but flavoured threequel in the Creed franchise. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Creed 3, I'm going to say that it's a 7.3 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that's it for the podcast today. Thank you, as always, for watching, and I'll reiterate what I said last week in the last podcast that I did, that over the next couple of months, I'm very busy because I'm in the midst of planning, researching, and soon to be writing drafts for my dissertation, so I don't have a lot of time right now. I only really have time to do podcasts once a week, so don't expect any videos in the meantime, but do expect another podcast probably next week, probably the same time next week, where I talk about the newest Scream film, and I'll also probably talk about the new Adam Driver film, 65, so look forward to that. probably coming, like I said, this time next week. But until then, guys, thank you as always for watching. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like, subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more, both film and TVs and podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. See you guys again soon. Bye for now. Bye.